participate if you don't want to, but go for it if you can. Okay, everybody stand up. Okay, we're gonna get everybody out of their seats. Okay, this session is all about trees and forestry and, right, dreaming of a peaceful future, right? Okay, here we go. So let's see if we can do a tree pose. Everybody ready? You're gonna try this? Yeah. Right? Right? Okay, this. Yes. You can put your hands up over your head. Yes. Oh, this is amazing. Yes. Woo! You guys are amazing. Yay! All right, good job. Good job. Woo! All right. That was awesome. Good job, you guys. Wow. Okay, okay. I love it. And look at that. It's right on time. All righty. Welcome to today's panel. We are super, super happy to help kick off the climate track at South by Southwest. And, you know, obviously, like, the topic of the panel is climate change and how we're affecting this and how it's affecting us. And usually, right, like, these kinds of discussions are very dire. Right? There's sort of gloom and doom, and climate change is gonna, like, affect us in all these negative ways, and we're not doing enough, et cetera, right? So we wanted to take a different tact, a different point of view in today's session. You've actually got this incredible group of panelists who will introduce themselves in just a moment here, but we've got folks from Restore, from American Forest, from Pachama. These are organizations that are really on the front line of abating climate change. I'm from Terraformation myself. I'll give you a little bit more information about myself in a second too. But all of us know the science of carbon sequestration, trees, forest ecosystems, and how much carbon, like the gigatons and gigatons of carbon sequestration that can come from nature-based solutions. And it's happening, right? So we actually wanted to take a hopeful, like a confidence sort of point of view to tell everybody, and I hope you actually take this message back, if nothing else from today's panel, take the message back that, like, okay, a solution is actually happening, right? That there are hundreds and hundreds of gigatons of carbon dioxide that are going to get pulled out of the atmosphere in the next few decades as a result of the work of these organizations that you saw today and many others that are involved in this space, and that world is happening. Right? And so we wanted to take a retrospective, a future retrospective point of view of, like, what happens in 50 years when the solution is already done, when we have actually regreened part of the planet, a major portion of the planet, and we have actually sequestered these hundreds of gigatons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and we've created these millions and millions of new jobs that are related to forestry and carbon project management and low carbon supply chains that are related to forestry and all of that, right? And have a discussion about what that world looks like, what those opportunities are, and hopefully identify some areas where all of us, everybody in the room, can have a role to play, can have some way to plug into this new, greener, more hopeful, climate-friendly future that's coming. Okay? So my name's Yi. I helped start this company called Terraformation about 3 years ago. Our mission is to create billions of acres of net new forests over the next decade. And the way that we're doing that is by fostering new forestry teams ourselves. So we've started 18 forestry teams in the last 3 years all around the world. And we are in the process of creating hundreds more new forestry teams through a forestry accelerator program that we run. I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and talk about how they also plug into this green new future. And then we'll get into our discussion topics today.
Great. Thanks so much. It's great to be here. I'm Clara Rowe, and I run an organization that's called Restore. And we are basically a Google Maps for nature. So we are bringing together nature restoration and conservation projects from around the world, tens of thousands of projects, places where people are bringing back nature in some way, shape, or form. Forests, but also wetlands and grasslands and mangroves and all of these different kinds of ecosystems. And because we're a global platform, I'm often inspired by global numbers, and I wanted to share a few of those numbers with you. So the first number is 3 trillion. 3 trillion is the number of trees that are on Earth today. It's many more trees than there are stars in the galaxy, in our galaxy, the Milky Way. It's astronomical. But it's only about half as many trees as we once had. And scientists have estimated that we can actually bring back another 1 trillion trees in degraded lands, areas that we aren't using for agriculture. And so the last number I'll give you is 30%. If we restore 1 trillion trees, we are going to suck down 30% of the carbon that we have accumulated in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. So it's a huge pathway. It's incredibly exciting, and that's what motivates us. I think it's what motivates so many of us on the panel today.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jad Daly. I'm the president and CEO of American Forests. We're the oldest forest conservation organization in America, founded in 1875. Really centered on a profound belief that trees and forests can offer solutions to our greatest needs and our greatest challenges. And our approach has always been about service leadership. How do we come into the middle of the conversation and help our country and our partners to identify what are the key issues of the moment and rally together, find a role for everyone in delivering tree and forest-based solutions as broad and wide and effectively as we possibly can. So like the other folks on the stage, you know, we're forest geeks at American Forest, but I want to get to know you just a little bit better. I'm kind of curious, how many people here are not forest people? You don't work for a forest-based organization, or you're not maybe volunteering with a forest-based organization or something like that. Okay, so we're mostly what we call non-forest people here, which is so exciting. That's why we're here. Because, you know, we get to talk to each other all the time, and this could actually be the first time I've ever been to an event like this, and I don't think I know a single person in this audience, and that excites the heck out of me, I gotta tell you, because this has to be an us thing. If we're going to create tree equity in our cities, which I want to speak about a lot more today and get into what that's about and what that could do for our country and the world, if we're going to achieve an incredible vision like that, bring equitable tree cover to our cities, which we very much don't have today, it's got to be an us thing. Any of the other solutions that we're going to talk about, reforesting our burned areas that are being scarred by wildfire thanks to climate change at a rate we've never seen before. We're not going to solve that one organization at a time, one place at a time. It's got to be a movement, and it's got to be all of us together. And so we are so psyched to meet you, and we are going to really challenge ourselves to talk today, not to tell you how great we are and all the cool things our organizations are doing. We want to talk about how you can get engaged, and because we need everyone, and there absolutely is a role for everyone. That's what last thing I want to say. I think one of the most exciting things is, you started off with this, climate change is paralyzing us right now. It is so terrifying, and the realities of the speed with which it's coming on are, in some ways, it's got us kind of all curled up in a fetal position. And hope comes from agency. Hope comes from when you feel like you don't just see a big scary problem and understand it, but you can do something about it. And more than just vote every few years. And so you're going to hear about a number of things that we're involved in here today that have got a role for everyone, whether it's your job or whether you're a volunteer, or whether you're just really great at social media. There's a place for you to move this agenda, and we can't wait to kind of spec some of that out for you today.
Well, hello everyone. Josh Parrish. So happy to be here today, and thank you for your time and coming and listening to us. First, I want to say, and build on hope and kind of how you can have agency and be with all this. I just want to let you know that I am a nut. I am a nut for forests. So I love trees. I love conservation. And just to give you a sense of my journey at Pachama and my journey in general, I started out my childhood in the Appalachian forests, very poor, to teenage parents who dropped out of high school, and spent my time in the forest, learning the woods, being part of the forest, and really seeing the connection between, people, my family, nature, what it can provide, and then also what, in the wrong circumstances, how it can be degraded and deforested and all kinds of other things. So that, actually that part of my life is probably the most positive part of my life and has been the biggest driver for doing what I do today. Fast forward to today, my wife and our 2 young girls, 7 and 9, we on a personal level have conserved over 700 acres in Pennsylvania with all of our spare change and money, farms and forests and things. So I'm deeply committed to this movement. I'm obviously a very optimistic and hopeful person, but a person who's had that level of engagement and agency and commitment and can see the positive impacts even at my level for future generations. And then, fast forward to where I'm at today, I lead our partnerships at Pachama, and being able to work for a technology company at Pachama, our mission is also to basically, protect and restore nature to solve the climate and biodiversity crises. So very aligned with my personal kind of heart and what drives me. And we are using technology, and you're going to hear here soon about all the great organizations that are up here on the stage. We're using technology as one of the, not the only, but one of the core tenets to really do this right. All the things you read out there and the skeptics and all these other things. In my mind, it's really a diversion to what needs to be done now. And if we don't act now, the future, is not going to be bright. And that's where we're hopeful here today to just get into what it's going to look like and start to do some visioning of the future.
All right, let's do this. So, and just as a reminder for the audience here, like everything that you hear today on stage is totally fair game for open Q&A later on. We'll definitely try to save a good chunk of time at the end of the panel for just audience participation and any questions that you all might have. But yeah, you've heard now, right? Like there's some tree nuts in the room, and there's a bunch of people who aren't into forestry. Love to start off the conversation today. Just let's envision, what does that world look like 50 years from now, right? We've actually succeeded in abating climate change, partly through forestry, partly through many other interventions, right? Jad, I want to pick up where you kind of started with this idea of like cities, people who maybe not necessarily are directly involved in forestry. What is their experience like of this new world?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing a lot of you probably didn't think we'd be talking about cities in this session today when that you're coming to hear about life on a reforested planet. I can't begin to tell you how important it is that we do talk about trees in cities. So here's a question. Does anybody know what statistically the greatest health threat is from climate change? What the type of extreme weather that kills the most people now and will into the future? Anyone want to take a shot at that? Extreme heat. I heard it. Yay. Give somebody a t-shirt back there or something. That is, thank you. We actually have an American Forest t-shirt. We can make that happen. Bravo. I think I even saw who that was. We'll claim your prize later. You're exactly right. Extreme heat. So today in America, this is just America, extreme heat kills more than 12,000 people per year. We have research from Duke University projecting that's going to be 100,000 people per year by the end of this century. Now here's the cold water. Those excess 88,000 deaths are not going to be distributed equitably across our populations. They're going to hit hardest on people who don't have air conditioning, who don't have adequate health care, have pre-existing health conditions, and guess what? Also don't have trees in their neighborhood, which can change the peak temperatures by more than 20 degrees. So think about all these heat waves that, if you live here in Austin, but now if you live anywhere in the country, if you live in Portland, Oregon, you're experiencing extreme heat, killer extreme heat. And that is on the rise in incredible ways. And so every neighborhood needs the incredible cooling power of trees. Again, it can reduce temperatures in neighborhoods. A difference of 20 degrees in your neighborhood, whether you have trees. Every neighborhood needs that, but especially the places where people are already most at risk. Now here's the worst part about it. If I show you a map of trees in any city in America, and this is actually also true globally, it's a map of income, and it's a map of race. It's actually the inverse of the protection that we need. And so our organization created something called Tree Equity Score to prove this and to give us a capacity to take action on it. You have your permission to multitask. You can look this up right now on your phone. treeequityscore.org. treeequityscore.org. And go in and check out your city. And we mapped it neighborhood by neighborhood for every urban neighborhood across America. And what we showed was that on average, the lowest income neighborhoods in America have 41% less tree cover than the wealthiest neighborhoods in America. Even more staggering, neighborhoods with a majority of people of color, regardless of income, have on average 33% less tree cover. So that means that lower income people and communities of color are systemically being exposed to greater heat risk because they don't have trees. So my vision is that we have a green roof over our cities in 2050 that is equitable, that is vibrant, that is bringing that natural cooling, and by the way, along with it, improved air quality, because trees also play a critical role in removing air pollution from our cities, and that we've brought that green roof equitably. And here's the last thing, back to chances for you to get involved. That Tree Equity Score, we designed it to be democratized data that everyone can use it, and we're seeing it being used by individuals and frontline organizations. It was also used by the U.S. Congress as part of the basis for investing $1.5 billion in tree equity for cities as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So there's power in that information, and I hope that you'll use it. Use it to find out how you can get involved in things that are happening in your city. Amazing organizations like Tree Folks here in Austin, and that you have all around the country that are waiting for volunteers and members and others to come forward and help them do this work, advocating for your mayors and local officials to make tree equity commitments like cities are doing all across America, and using your voice on social media and with federal policymakers and state policymakers to keep making the kinds of investments like we've now gotten in this work of tree equity through the Inflation Reduction Act. So there's a movement out there building because of how dire these health issues are, these health equity issues are related to tree equity in our cities, and there's absolutely a place for all of you to help us keep that movement rolling.
I love that vision of greener cities, and exactly as you're saying, right? Like in an unexpected way, there's all these opportunities for trees to make a really tangible difference in this greener future. Now, Clara, we were talking before the session about sort of these day-to-day sort of almost consumer interaction, right, kinds of moments where people will feel a difference, right, in their experience. Maybe tell us about your vision there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, urban trees, we need forests in all these different places. 1 trillion trees, I think we often think about like big swaths of forest in places that are so far away from us. But the reality is that in 2050, when we've achieved our vision, forests are going to be in patches all throughout our lives. There's all of these different ways that we weave forests into the daily fabric of our lives. And one of those is the way that we understand what we consume and food. So I want you to imagine for a minute that you pulled out the cereal box that you had this morning for breakfast, and you're kind of perusing through the side because, maybe your phone's a little bit farther away. You're looking at the ingredient list. You might be looking at the calories or the nutrition. And you're also seeing, because it's 2050, information about the species of trees that were restored in the agroforestry plots there, and the tons of carbon that were sequestered by the regenerative agriculture in this area. So you have this completely new perspective on what it is that you are a part of and that you are touching. We're touching nature in every part of our lives, but we aren't empowered to know it. We don't have the tools to take the action that we really want to take. And so for me, that cereal box, it's making the invisible visible. In 2050, when we've reforested our planet, the invisible, that invisible way that we have impact is visible. So that's a piece of it.
Love that. Josh, what is your vision? How does this look to people around the world?
For the guy that's the nut? Yeah. So my vision, I really see a world, and Jad beat me to it on the cities and knows much more than I and speaks wonderful about it, and Clara as well with kind of the patchwork. But I see really a world that forests are connected, that's a healthier world, that's a cooler world on the average, and then it's a more diverse world. And I can weave those two things, the diversity together, because as we reforest and get to 2050, it's critical that we have a patchwork of forests and trees available for all of us and for nature. The other thing is we need to essentially protect the large conservation areas that are still around the globe. Of the 4 million hectares of forest that are left around the world, and it's been identified with scientists and it's been mapped, but we need to protect those places and then build out what I think of, it's the opposite of us driving around even in our electric cars. We need superhighways for nature, for flora and fauna. And what that is natural habitats, forests, streamside, riparian buffers, all these other places that as climate changes, as we, there's no question anymore, as we get warmer, even under scenarios where we make a lot of headway and get there, nature needs the ability to adapt and to migrate and essentially and to move around. It's been there for millennia. It's been there for millions of years. Things have been changing. And the one thing I see is with that vision of 2050, we create a essentially network of connections with forests that provide for that. And then so by that we have a diverse ecological framework, but then getting to the forests are primary forests, they're suburban, they're urban. There's this whole kind of network that also plays to diversity for people. It kind of is, it's an intermixed thing in my opinion. It has to be one and the same because we're part of nature. And then, last but not least is the health side, the healthier side. Nature and forests can be on both sides of the coin for health, right? It can help us, stay healthy, but also help cure us from diseases and other things of which we don't know of right now that are yet to be discovered. So we need to, by 2050, kind of preserve that and continue to kind of carry that through time for all of us.
I love that word connection as a sort of a touch point, right? That forests are so deeply connected into every part of life, and we may not think about it all the time. So exposing it on the back of the cereal box, or thinking about it on your daily walk around a city block, right? Or understanding, right, how many supply chains for building materials or agricultural supply chains are reliant on the trees and the plants around us. That more connected green future is an amazing vision. What stands in our way? What blockers do you see that might hinder us, right, to reach that future?
Can you tell us your vision first?
Oh, my vision. Okay. Let's see. I feel like I've thought about this mostly from almost like a sci-fi utopian point of view. I feel like there's so many science fiction movies that are like dystopian, right? Blade Runner, etc., right? Where there's like, this completely paved over world, or like, what was it, Coruscant, I think, in Star Wars, right? It's like the completely built over planet, right? But I think that our future is actually going to be much more connected in that way, that we're really actually going to see little bits of nature interspersed all throughout our daily lives and our built environments, and that we as a global society will come to realize in the next 50 years really how interdependent and connected we really are with nature, and we'll be able to weave together these themes into our built environment. So that's how I think about it.
Can I riff off this connection theme for a little bit? Because you would have thought like we totally planned this out. Actually, really didn't. This theme of connection, which I think is so profound, because it's a word I had thought about a lot in advance of this panel as well, and what could be different. And I want to talk about, in the context of this tree equity work, some huge connections. Because one thing we say all the time, tree equity, it's not about trees, it's about people. It's about what trees can do for people, the changes they can help to affect in parts of our cities that have been so underserved, that have faced systemic racism, systemic disinvestment. And so it's really critical from our perspective that it's not about the tree. It's about how does the tree fit into a number of intersectional changes and investments that we need to make in the neighborhoods and in the communities that have been disadvantaged for such a long time. And so there are two things that where the trees do connect that I think are really important in this regard. One is there's really profound research about the impacts it has on how community members relate to each other in a neighborhood that has trees. There are profound mental health benefits. There are ways that being in a green environment literally changes how you feel and how you interact with other people. And so a tremendous research showing people are healthier, there's less crime, they are more social and interactive. People even spend more on tree-lined streets and shopping, so they make for more economic prosperity that way. So it's literally, it's the fount, it's one of the founts of health, wealth, and prosperity and community connection in communities. We come together under the branches, right? But there's another piece of it as well, which is that the systemic inequity that's driving, so many of the challenges that I've described before you get to the tree part is economic inequity. Profound, vast economic inequities. Many of the places that you'll see on Tree Equity Score, neighborhoods where working 61% of people in poverty. Places where unemployment runs 3-4 times the prevailing average in a city. And so if we don't turn this investment in tree equity into jobs for people in those neighborhoods, shame on us. We consider that immoral and unjust. It has to be part of a just transition. We have to take responsibility for turning those investments, like the $1.5 billion that we have from the Inflation Reduction Act, into jobs for the people who need them the most in the neighborhoods that also, among other things, need trees. And so that's why when we launched our tree equity work 5 years ago, we in parallel launched a Career Pathways initiative where we said, let's ask, why isn't this happening already? We know government agencies who can't find enough people, which is one of our barriers. We know tree care companies like Davey Tree that have thousands of vacant positions. They're turning away work because they can't find people. And we're working in neighborhoods where people need jobs. We should be able to figure this out. And what we found after a year of investigation was that ladder of opportunities missing a couple rungs, like pre-employment programs. Pre-employment programs working with justice-involved persons, 8 weeks, 10 weeks of transitional training, in many cases, can help people make that bridge to then get into some of these fantastic career opportunities that are already there and that we're going to scale up to incredible rate now in volume with the kind of investment that we're making. But that's not going to happen by accident. I mean, I can tell you, we did the research, 25.7 direct, indirect, and induced jobs for $1 million that we invest in this work. Amazing opportunity, but we have to take responsibility for making sure those jobs get to the people who need them the most. And so that kind of intentionality, I think, is how we're going to get connection out of this work. And I'll just leave you all with, the last final image. We were in Detroit for the kickoff of this Detroit Tree Equity Partnership in October. And listening to people from the community coming together and talking about what this means to this community. A young person who talked about how he feels about some of the things that happened earlier in his life and that he did in his community and what it means to be able to get back to his community now doing this work of tree equity. Mothers who came from other neighborhoods saying, I want to make sure you're going to bring trees to my neighborhood too because this is so important for children in my neighborhood. So if you have anything that, hey, is this kind of some, top-down effort or do people really care about this? I can tell you, we heard testimonials there that would make you cry. And this is real. These are profound benefits. It's not the only thing by a long shot, but if it's intersected with the other things that we need to do in the neighborhoods that need this the most, it can be part of the change that we're trying to create.
I love that, how deep research into societal issues as well as ecological issues results in like an intervention, like a very concrete intervention, like a pre-work training program that then opens up, right, these opportunities. That's amazing. What, Clara, Josh, what other blockers do you see, right, either within the United States or globally, right, that would stand in the way, right, of getting to this vision for you?
So blockers, right now, and one of the core things that we're building at Pachama is the technology to really measure at scale, remotely, forests and trees. And the classic kind of management theory is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If we don't know what we have, it's really hard to know, to protect it, to manage it, to promote it. And that it's that combined with, obviously there's a shift here too, that as a society we need to place value and values on all of these services that forests are providing, that all of these associated, getting to the box of cereal, we need to create a system that plays in our current economic systems and brings these forests, nature-based benefits into that system, so they're essentially appropriately measured. And then this also gets to equity in places where you have communities that have forests that have that are restoring, protecting, all of those things, that essentially that they are then compensated for and able to be part of this kind of green economy. So it creates a whole new kind of, I think about it as like a whole new list of jobs. It's not just planting trees. It's not just, it creates, a whole new science movement, with folks, which is, I think, really, really exciting. And just so many other cascading, opportunities for people really to kind of, the way I kind of think about it is, if I wasn't here today, I'd probably be covered in dirt from my farm because I like playing in the dirt and in the forest. And it's really bringing folks back closer to Mother Nature and to the very systems that we need to live.
I love that. Before coming to you, Claire, I want to riff on this because this is something that we see a lot in my organization's work as well. When we're fostering like a new forestry team or a forestry project somewhere in the world, could be Tanzania, could be Kenya, could be Colombia, Indonesia, etc. A lot of the sort of the light bulb moment or the bit to flip is not necessarily just about planting trees and here's the species to pick and how to put them in the field, but it's actually about the economic opportunities and the jobs that come with that, right? That like, oh, if I restore a mangrove ecosystem around a coast, there's a whole shrimp aquaculture business that gets built along the root systems of that. That if I plant the right kinds of hardwood trees in Colombia, that there's a whole shade-grown cacao and shade-grown coffee business that grows up around the base of those trees as well, right? And so it's not just literally about forests and trees per se. There's a whole economic livelihood, right, that gets created. And the blocker, right, very often is like, how do we skill up that whole new economic activity? How do we create the entrepreneurial mindset that I'm not just here to pick up grant money to plant trees, but instead I'm actually literally creating a business, right, for myself, for my local region. Anyway, so that's Claire.
And to build off that, I mean, I think what you're saying around this bottleneck of how do I get involved and how do I get involved in a sustainable way, right? In a way that I can keep doing over time. And each of you have picked up on that thread. And for me, that's one of the huge bottlenecks is that it's really unclear how you get involved. And if we take, you're right to point out there's all these different kinds of jobs that fall into the new restoration economy that are going to come. But let's take more traditional restoration, planting or regrowing trees. We don't know where to start. Many of us don't know where to start. And we don't know where to start either because we don't have the technical information and we don't know who to go to. And we don't have money to make it happen if we're thinking about the small scale, piece of that. And so having a network to tap into to figure out, like, where do I go? Okay, how do I figure out that there are job opportunities in these cities? How do I figure out if I'm a small reforestation project that there's somewhere to go? That, for me, is a big hurdle. And it's one of the things that we aspire to as Restore is to be that connective tissue as we bring together actors all over the world, not just the people who are doing the work, but you and you and you. We have American Forests and Terraformation sitting on Restore, ready to help those projects and tree nurseries and botanical gardens. And it's how do we create that neural network of a restorative economy that can tap into each other so that it's clear how we each get to be a part of that.
Can I riff off of that? Because that really resonates for me, Clara. And I think I want to just kind of draw that thread out a little bit on two variables of getting this right. One is innovation, and the other is mobilization. I hope maybe there's some ecopreneurs. I mean, we're here in a tech hub, and this is a cool spot. So I'm hoping there are people here who are like inventors, creators. We need a lot of that. We need to hack the forest sector. It looks like it was designed in the early 1900s, and it needs to look like something that was designed in year 2200 to meet the kind of scaling up and the need that we're talking about here. So there are opportunities for an invention and innovation. Pachama and Restore are two great examples of them. But sometimes, the invention and innovation, it takes different forms. Like, there are exciting things being done with biotechnology around finding ways to help tree seedlings grow more effectively, solving for some of the challenges around growing trees and figuring out the right trees to grow in a changing climate for that will be resilient. So sort of science questions that tie to technology and that have technology-driven analysis and solutions behind them. There's so many different ways, whether it's getting the right work or whether it's scaling the work up, where we really need innovation and inventors. And I think you're absolutely right. Sort of painting the target for helping people understand where we need that is a big part of it. And then the other part of it is mobilization. One of the partnerships I'm the most proud of is with the Girl Scouts of the USA. And the Girl Scouts of the USA were a few years ago grappling with the fact that across the Girl Scouts, and this is from the bottom up, Girl Scouts were speaking very openly about their climate grief and their fears about climate change and wanting to do something. And they wanted to do something they could be tangibly involved in. And so they birthed from really the grassroots of the Girl Scouts the idea for the Girl Scout Tree Promise, which is a goal to plant 5 million trees in 5 years. And literally, Girl Scouts are going out there in the field and partnering in these projects and leading these projects all across the country. It's one of the most beautiful, powerful mobilizations that our organization has ever been involved in our almost 150-year history. And that ties to an even bigger mobilization. There's a coalition that's come together, the U.S. chapter of 1T.org. It's us.1t.org if you want to check it out online. And it by design said, it's not enough, again, to have just the forest folks working together. It's got to be governments to Girl Scouts. We have to create something that is designed to mobilize all of the people who want to be involved. And you've got companies, like Salesforce and Bank of America and others. They're not forestry, companies, but they're saying, hey, how can we get engaged in our sustainability activities through forest and the forest sector? Civil society organizations, not just Girl Scouts, but faith-based organizations and others who say, hey, we can advance our social justice goals or environmental goals through the power of trees. And so I think it's about, like you said, Claire, it's about bringing folks together to have strategic partnerships that are radically inclusive and where we line up all the things that need to get done and let everybody figure out, hey, I'm volunteering for this job, whether it's going to be your business or whether it's something you're literally going to be a volunteer, but we got to kind of organize it so everyone can dock into this movement in the right ways. And I think there are exciting examples of where that's starting to happen really powerfully.
Yes. So that's a perfect lead in actually to our next topic, which is thinking about sources of inspiration, right? Like what it could be within your current organizations, could be across the world in your travels and your discussions. But what examples have you seen that really inspire you? I'll give you a couple from just from what I've seen so far. Last year, outside of Paris, there is a agricultural and botanical engineering university. Specializes right in agricultural graduates that are going to go into the agribusiness field, and the graduating class literally revolted. Right, they stood up on stage at the moment of receiving their degrees. They gave speeches that said, "We do not accept these job offers that we've received as graduating seniors. You've trained us for the last 4 years to go work at Monsanto and other agribusiness companies, but we do not accept. We actually want to go apply the knowledge that we have received here in other ways." Right, in other businesses that are outside of the mainstream of agribusiness. And I'm not here to like poop talk about like whatever agriculture business is a mainstream blah blah blah, the food supply, right? But just that spirit of innovation and saying I'm not going to accept the status quo, and I'd rather apply my efforts in ways that I feel like are more aligned with this future vision that I want to get to as a young person. I love that. That to me was so inspiring. Almost made me cry. I showed it to my kids. Second example, this actually comes from a few years ago when we were starting Terraformation. I happened to live in Hawaii at the time, and there was a local business that was making ukuleles and guitars out of koa hardwood. It's actually like a native and endemic species to the Hawaiian Islands, and they realized, well, we're running out of supply. Actually, of koa, it's an endangered species there, and so they literally began a conservation program and a replanting, like a reforestation program for the high altitude. Koa is a high altitude plant, so they were replanting koa along peaks and ridge lines in Hawaii. They were able to derive carbon credits from these projects, right? So they were creating carbon projects out of it, and out of the trees that were wind damaged and storm felled, right? They were able to create a supply of hardwood for themselves to then produce these amazing, like beautiful instruments that actually sell for really like top dollar instruments. And so they were able to weave in, right, like these ecologically sound and climate positive efforts as part of a for-profit business that makes a tidy sum of money. And I'm like, hats off to you guys. That's amazing. Yeah. But would love to hear some other examples of inspiration.
It's really hard to choose, especially when you run a platform that has 130,000 projects. And I often think about there's a lot of high-tech things that are making the news these days, drones planting seeds and apps that measure carbon. And actually, Colin here in the audience has an incredible startup that is taking soil from healthy forests and planting it in areas where there's reforestation to accelerate. So just an incredible swath. But the one I'm going to choose Costa Rica, the government of Costa Rica, for 50 years, so old solution, very innovative, we should all pay attention, has been paying farmers to conserve and restore forests on their land. And it's meant that Costa Rica is the first tropical country to reverse deforestation. People are getting paid to do something that's good for water, that's good for biodiversity, that's good for air, it's good for carbon. And it has also changed, and I grew up in Costa Rica, so I feel this and live this, has changed the relationship that a lot of the country has to nature. And so then it's not just about the money, it's about what it is that we value about being in, and maybe it's forests, and maybe it's the coastline, and it's sitting and looking at the waves. And because we've created an economy, they have created an economy that allows us to benefit from nature. We can love nature in a different way. And that for me is a really powerful thing and something that I've been very inspired by.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, for me, something that inspires me over the last year is working. I've been working a lot with a group and with Native American tribal lands, and learning a lot is what I've found. Learning that I have a lot to learn about all of their knowledge and wisdom, and just the ways of kind of stewarding lands and being on the land. And one thing that's really inspiring to me, and it's not any one project, but is a realization working with them. We're saying about all this new technology and all these new ways we're doing agriculture and regenerative, and I'm like, holy hell, like regenerative, that's so like like 500 years ago or whatever, 1,000 years ago. And that really it feels like we're at a moment where after COP15 and that we're really at this moment globally where we're recognizing that that there is for all of us a lot to learn, and for me that's just really that's inspiring. It gives me a lot of hope that we'll actually kind of not do the things of the past that were obviously not the right thing to do, and we will learn from that and learn from wisdom of our land stewards.
Awesome. Well, I actually want to go real high level, and then I want to go real ground level, if that's okay. I think that's taken two, sorry. But at the real high level, I've talked so much about this historic $1.5 billion investment from Inflation Reduction Act in true equity in cities, but that's part of $20 billion that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act for forest climate solutions, which of course, as we've talked about, are much more than just climate solutions. They're biodiversity solutions, they're community solutions, they're justice solutions, there's so much more. Personally, I first started working on forest and climate change in 2007. It's been a long road to this point, long before it was cool. It's kind of amazing to see where we finally are now, where we have a room full of people here who came in expecting to talk about the connection between forest and climate change. There would have been 5 people here in 2007 probably. So it's just incredibly exciting that we've reached this moment of awareness and buy-in, and that our political leaders are investing in this work now at a level where we can show the world what we can really do. Because that isn't the end of the road, it's actually the next step in the journey. But now we can actually show what this is about at a scale that actually helps more people see what this life on a reforested planet could be. But I do want to come back to the ground level, because this is ultimately about the people, the communities where this is happening. And I've talked a lot about urban communities, but I do want to talk about rural communities. Rural communities in this country are hurting economically and have been hurting really badly, really about since the 2008 financial crisis. If you've ever looked at the data, the economic fate of rural communities, the closure of health facilities in rural communities, there are equally profound inequities and injustices happening in rural America, just like there are in parts of our urban communities. And so the need to bring that workforce effect to rural communities and urban communities the right way is equally present. And so, you know, at both ends of the spectrum, one of the places where we're seeing some of the greatest job creation and sort of new business incubation is on the front end of the reforestation pipeline, on collecting the seeds that we then use to grow the trees that we then actually plant. And most people kind of jump to the planting part, you know, but there's a lot that has to happen before that to actually grow the right trees that we ultimately plant. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of the new economic activity. So, for example, we partner with the state of California and the Forest Service to start something called the Cone Corps, which is really focused at youth and people who have been left out of the economy, working predominantly in rural areas, collecting the right cones to be able to then collect the right seeds to grow the trees that we're going to use to reforest all those millions of burned acres across very, very rural parts of California. But at the other end of the spectrum, in places like Detroit and Phoenix and other cities, you've got ecopreneurs in urban areas who are, starting these networks of urban tree nurseries, and especially in cities that have a lot of land, like Detroit and Cleveland and others, these sort of land-rich communities, but that are in some cases very economically distressed areas. There's this huge opportunity to turn that land into an accelerant for the tree equity work and turn that into an economic opportunity as well. And so I just think about, we can talk about big dollars and big moves, but it translates down to these stories, these day in, day out stories, these people's lives who are being changed by finding new career pathways in this work.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to follow up on this in just 1 second. But before we get to the last question for the panelists, I want to encourage everybody in the audience, start thinking about questions and topics that you'd like to pose for open Q&A. We'll start handing out mics, I guess, or we'll come around for raised hands for questions in just a minute. Okay, start thinking about that. Last question for our panelists. I want to make this personal for us, right? And for me, like one of the reasons I got into the space and kind of exited like the technology sector that I'd been in for 20 years, in 2019, my eldest kid turned 12. And when you have teenagers, you start to ask questions, right? Or they start to ask questions about what should I do when I grow up, and what sort of career options should I look at. So I'd love to hear from each of you, right? As you talk to your kids, to your nieces and nephews, right? What do you tell them? Right. What industry should they get into? What skills do you think they should start to educate themselves in as you think about this new world? For me personally, I come from Silicon Valley, right? It would have been really easy to tell my kids, oh yeah, learn to code, learn to design, launch a new social media app or something, right? But no, I actually told my kids, like, you guys should really think about food supply. You should think about like where the food comes from that we all eat, because I guarantee you your food supply chain is going to look very different, right? When you're my age, I'm 50, it's going to look very different for you than when, than right now. So think about how your food gets produced, and think about ways that you can plug into that new world.
This might sound like a cop-out answer, but to me, it's important that we do all the same things with a different mindset. Because we need everyone who's doing everything that they're doing, but we need it to be tied to what is our impact on the environment and how does that feed back to us? What is the impact that we have on each other? How are we spending our time, and how do we prioritize within the industries that we're already in? So I don't want the tech sector to go away, but I want the tech sector to be thinking about what every single piece of how they're touching our world. And in a way, that's it's a beautiful thing, because it touches all of us, but it also means that all of us have a responsibility there. All of us have something that we need to do, even if it's just in the cereal box that we're buying. But it's impossible for us not to be a part of it. It doesn't really matter what that job is.
So I won't be a scofflaw and flip the script here. So I want to talk about what young people have taught me. And I've had the incredible honor to get to know some of the most just talented, passionate, tireless activists, folks like Kevin Patel, who started One Up Action, Sophia Kiani, who started Climate Cardinals. These people, as teenagers, they started organizations. They're having a global impact at an age when all I could think about was myself. It's just absolutely stupefying. And I wish I could name all of the incredible youth activists I've had the chance to be exposed to. And so what they've taught me is, failure is not an option. And sometimes I think if you've been working on this work for a long time, and a lot of us in this room are of a certain age group where the worst of these impacts, when it's 100,000 people a year dying from extreme heat in this country, a lot of us in this room are not going to be around. I hope everyone's aware of that. It wasn't bad news for anyone, but it's true. And so, you can get inured to it at some point. Not that you don't care, but you can get a little bit inured to it. And when you spend time with these youth activists who they fight every hour of every day like failure is not an option, then you come back and say, I got to find a way to be better. I got to work harder. Tree equity in our cities is not a luxury item, it's a moral imperative. People's lives are at stake. We need to act like it. We need to fight every hour of every day like it. And so that would be my charge to all of you. It doesn't matter whether your role is to go tweet the heck out of this and turn some people on to these issues, or whether it's to get involved in other ways, all the different ways we've talked about. But we all just need to start acting like failure isn't an option, and nature-based solutions for all the challenges we're facing have to be part of that solution. We cannot win without them. And so we got to max this out and take it to a totally different level, and that means working as hard as we possibly can, even harder than we're working now.
Well, I guess I'm last up, but for me, I just want to say again, as I said at the beginning of my intro, like everybody can make a difference. So I kind of agree with what's been said here. Like, in whatever you're doing, like it's thinking about it, maybe a new mindset, or maybe it's already your mindset. It's seeking out connections in places where that are either just starting out and innovating, it's being creating something new, and or just seeking out existing opportunities to really, even at the local kind of micro level, make a difference. And for me, just sitting here thinking about it, what gives me the drive and really the hope is really my two girls who are now 7 and 9, and we live off the land. So mushrooms, everything, berries, nuts, mushrooms, you name it. We pick it, and we know tree by tree, and the symbiotic mycorrhizal relationships with in areas in our forest. So, me walking around with my kids and kind of seeing how their eyes just kind of like light up, and just they're like, you really get it. Like that, this is all connected. Like back to my connectivity and diversity. Like they get it, and the other thing for me, my 2 young girls, I don't want that. I know it was International Women's Day a few days ago. Just thinking like, I want them to get it, and I want them to have opportunities, and I want them to be in a world that really is blind to color and all of these other things. And I think for me, that forest and that kind of them out there, kind of finding their own way and seeing all these connections is really a way for them to be, into the future, just wonderful stewards and great people.